I'm covering Pet Shop Boys, and in the opening montage, you heard It's a Sin, and now you're going to hear What Have
230 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 29 in 1987, number 1,487 of all time. It is the Pet Shop Boys' highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. It did not crack Rolling Stone's top 500 list, but the Pet Shop Boys are ranked number 389 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
All right. I didn't know too much about the Pet Shop Boys or was too familiar with their music. I think I'd heard the hits. But the Pet Shop Boys were formed in London in 1981, and it's made up of two boys, or then boys, Neil Tennant on vocals and Chris Lowe on keyboards. They met at a hi-fi store, as they call it in the UK, when Tennant bought a Korg synthesizer, and that started a conversation between the two of them, and they became fast friends, and they bonded over listening to music. Specifically, Souvenirs by Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark and Bedsitter by Soft Cell, two bands that we have not covered, but have, well-known singles that we've definitely heard, like, well, I can't think of the names right now, but I definitely know Soft Cell. And
Tainted Love would be Soft Cell's
yes,
biggest song. Yeah.
That would be the one I was thinking of. After a time of hanging out and listening to music, they would start to write and work on material themselves originally. The name of the band comes from two people they knew who worked in a pet shop in West London that were known as the Pet Shop Boys. So they just took that. Nothing fancy there for the name. In August of 1983, Tennant was working for the music magazine called Smash Hits, and he went to New York to interview Sting. And while he was there, he brought a demo tape of two songs that they had done, It's a Sin and Opportunity, parentheses, Let's Make Lots of Money, and gave it to producer Bobby Orlando. And then Bobby Orlando worked with them for a while, and in the 83 to 84 time period, they recorded 11 tracks with the Pet Shop Boys in Orlando. And in April of 84, they released West End Girls, which became a club hit in LA and San Francisco. But that's not the end of West End Girls. In March of 1985, they cut ties with Bobby O and signed to Parlophone Records. And in July of 85, they released the single Opportunity, Let's Make Lots of Money. And in August, they went back into the studio and re-recorded West End Girls. So it was released as a single on October 1985 in the UK and slowly rose to number one there. It also became a big hit in the US nationally and elsewhere around the world. And then they did a follow-up single called Love Comes Quickly in February of 1986, followed by their debut album Please, released in March of 86. The one-word titles of their albums is something that they started right from the first album and became a thing of theirs. All of their albums are one-word titles, even their one that they released most recently in 2020. In September of 86, the Pet Shop Boys performed Love Comes Quickly and West End Girls at the 1986 MTV VMAs. And then in June 15th of 1987, they released their second number one single, It's a Sin, followed up by the single in August, What Have I Done to Deserve This, which reached number 2 in the UK and US charts. And as I mentioned, Dusty Springfield appears on this track. And they actually wanted to release this song on their first album, but they really wanted to record with Dusty Springfield, and they couldn't get a hold of her, so they sat on it until her manager finally contacted them, and she agreed to record with them. And this became a collaboration between the three of them for basically the rest of the decade, and also resurrected her career, which led to her 1990 album Resurrection, which the Pet Shop Boys were producers and writers on. In August of 87, they appeared on a British TV show Love Me Tender, which was a celebration of the 10th anniversary of Elvis's death, or a tribute show to that. And they performed and later released the version of Always on My Mind, which you've probably heard of if you go listen to that. That became their third number one hit in the UK and a number one Christmas single, beating the Pogues' Fairy Tale of New York, which we have talked about before with the Pogues. And then this album was released actually in September of 1987. There were 4 singles off of this album. It's a Sin, Rent, What Have I Done to Deserve This, and Heart. All 4 of them were UK top 10 singles. And not much, couldn't find much on kind of the production of the album. So that's really kind of all I have on it as far as the album itself. So I have some follow-up stuff because the Pet Shop Boys have continued to make music, and both of them are still alive and doing well. And so there's a long career post this album, and they seem to be as popular as ever. But what did you guys think of Actually and the Pet Shop Boys?
Who you want to go first?
How about you, John?
Okay. So I must admit, like, my dad had a lot of Pet Shop Boys stuff, and I don't know why, but I just never really engaged with it. Mm-hmm. I think they suffer from something that I really try to not let affect me, which is the name just drove me away from them. Mm-hmm. Like, you hear different stuff, but for whatever reason, I think that was the barrier for me. So I'm familiar with, West End Girls and stuff like that. Yeah. I did not realize until this album that I was definitely familiar with What Have I Done to Deserve This, and It's a Sin as well. Mm-hmm. I just don't think I ever processed it as the Pet Shop Boys. So this was the rare one, guys, where I feel like I should have had more knowledge of the band than I did. I'm normally the one kind of joking, like, how did you guys die? And I feel like that's me in this one, for sure. With that being said, I really like this album a lot. This is what I want my electronic music to sound like. It breezed by for me. All I could think of when I heard this was, this is how electronic music is supposed to sound for my specific ear. There's an earworm quality to this entire album that I found myself sort of humming subconsciously or singing along with the songs. I even found myself a couple times re-listening to songs after I listened to them because I enjoyed them, and really I was slightly caught off guard by how much I like the songs, and also the quality throughout this album. I was used to, it just seems like so many of the albums that are sort of electronic pop music that we've listened to, there's some highs, right? But after a while, there's this feeling that it blends together after a while, or it's very inconsistent. This was the first album that was electronic music since Kraftwerk, really. And Kraftwerk's very different than this, by the way, in many ways, in terms of what they're going for. This is the first electronic album, though, since Kraftwerk, where I did not get the synth and the elements of electronic music didn't start to blend together to me in like the 20, 25, 30 minute mark. And so that's, I think I said at the beginning, like, what are going to be some of the albums that turn me more on to synth music? Mm-hmm. And, like, I knew my thoughts on Depeche Mode were that I liked a fair amount of stuff. I didn't like love theirs, but I knew I liked it. I knew New Order was a little more hit and missy for me. And, we've had things like Public Image Limited or, that Simple Minds album, the earlier Simple Minds album and stuff. And there just always seemed to be a distance for me in terms of liking it, but not here. This, and also on the other hand, we had like Phil Collins and stuff that just didn't connect with me either as much. But this is definitely my lane. The 2 songs I mentioned, It's a Sin and What Have I Done to Deserve This, are songs that I was very familiar with and liked. King's Cross at the end was a really cool song. Heart before, like 9 and 10 were as a 1-2 punch to end the album. They did something that rarely ever happens when you get into an album, I feel like, in the 80s albums we've covered, where it's like, I could go 2 or 3 more tracks on this and be totally okay with it. I don't know what it is, guys, that resonates so much with me, and I'll expand a little bit more when I open up the take. I'm hoping that maybe you guys can articulate what it is sonically, or because I can't imagine both of you guys won't like this album because you've liked albums that sound like this, but I thought were inferior versions of this. So it's hard for me to believe that when you hear this with pre-existing taste that you won't be like, yeah, I really like this one. But I've been surprised before. So Matt, are my instincts right with you, or am I wrong?
No, I'm with you. This album's great. This is a lot of fun. I have to admit, like, and I'm surprised by this because, like, you're like, oh, I knew It's a Sin, and like, and I found none of these songs recognizable. I knew Pet Shop Boys. Yeah, it was weird. Sherry's like, how did you not know It's a Sin? I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't. Maybe I heard it before, but it didn't stand out. But I know West End Girls certainly stands out for me with them. Let's Make Lots of Money. That's not on this record, but that's a song I'm like, oh, I always, I knew that song, but for some reason, nothing. I didn't really remember any of these
some
tracks.
of these might be because my dad played these and I didn't process that they were Pet Shop Boys songs.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so I don't know what my barrier to entry with these guys was. But I never really knew anybody that listened to them and to go beyond that. But I found this to be a really easy listen from the beginning. I like a couple of things about it. I think, first of all, the production is fantastic.
Yep.
I think that this, and maybe this is part of it, what you're saying, John, but to me, this kind of walks a really nice balance between like an 80s, there's total 80s synth all over this, but it's done in a way that's kind of almost modern. Like there's a lot of like synth-based bands today.
Yep.
Like the 80s don't own a monopoly on synth stuff, right?
For sure.
Like, there's a lot of stuff that's happening coming out in the last 10 years plus, or even 20 years, that's still like this. They brought the synths back and kind of made it made it less dated and made it more, modern. There's songs on this that I could feel like would come out today. Like King's Cross, I agree. That might be my favorite track on this. I was like, what a great ending track to this. It's just the melody behind that, the production, it's just this really cool sounding record. And so I think that's part of it for me. It's both of its time, but also of today, I think, in a lot of ways. I think that there's a good mix on here. I agree with you, John. I don't think that this blends together or gets samey. I think that they do a good job of mixing the tracks, to be more upbeat dance songs and then there's more like reflective, melancholy kind of like, these, songs to be played at night when you're chilling out. But it kind of, it does a good mixture of those things. I think there's a good mixture of different types of effects. And it's just super catchy. Like Shopping was a ridiculously catchy song. Like that reminded me of Kraftwerk, like SHOPPING.
I did
or
get that sense too. Yeah.
It's like a Kraftwerk song. Hit Music, man, that sounds like that Bananarama song. Like the very beginning
song?
of
dun,
dun, dun, dun, dun, dun, dun.
Yep.
Yeah, She's Got It. It's the same
music.
exact thing as She's Got It. But I love like the Rent is a really cool mellow song that's got this really nice sound to it. I don't think that there's a weak track on here. The Dusty Springfield track is great as well. I think the guy's got a cool voice. It's another one of those voices that actually kind of sounds British, which I think I've talked about before, that sometimes the British artists, their vocals can go a little bit more, they can lose their accent, but it's still here with that. So yeah, I like.
Can I posit something for you?
Yeah,
real quick. Do you think It's a Sin could rise as high as like one of the like 10 to 15 best singles of the 80s? Because after I listened to that a couple times, I'm like, this is nearly a perfect 80s single.
It's pretty infectious listening to it.
I don't know. Like, that's a hard question. It's great. I don't know if I would say that, but it's a great song.
Yeah.
Okay.
Possibly. I didn't think of it like that. But I think it's a real solid record. I think that it might be, and this is where my not ranking of things, the way that John does things, kind of hurts me a little bit, but it might be the most consistent 80s electronic album that I've heard so far. In terms of my level of enjoyment of each song, I think there are elements of New Order, there are elements of Depeche Mode, other acts that we covered that not necessarily. It's not so much that I didn't like certain songs, but they didn't really grab me, or as much as pretty much every song on here did to one degree or another. So in that sense, this might be a more consistent electronic record for me. John, how did you? Because this wasn't on Rolling Stone and it wasn't on best ever albums. Was this like was this a Pitchfork album, or do you remember where you got this from?
I don't. It showed up many places.
Did it?
So even
Yeah.
though it might not have been on those, it wasn't one where I was like, oh, this is. It showed up in a couple different places as
Yeah.
ranking. So I don't. Which one specifically, I can't remember.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I was just curious because I was like, man, this is really good, and it's 230 on best ever albums, so it's way out of the top 100, you know. But yeah, this is great. If you like synth pop, if you like, whether it's an 80s sound or a more modern sound, definitely recommend this.
if you like
really
awesome
consistent record.
pre-choruses and bridges, is another thing this album's
Yeah.
just filled with. Is fantastic song structure.
Yeah, great melody, great hooks, great way to building up to the choruses. Just and cool different synth sounds. Yeah, they're not it's a synth lane for sure, but they're kind of experimenting in different ways, which was definitely appreciated. So yeah, big thumbs up here. I really like this one.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I was really surprised. I didn't know anything about Pet Shop Boys other than maybe West End Girls, so I wasn't expecting like straight up synth pop dance record the whole album. I don't know what I was expecting, but when it
You know what I was thinking of, Josh? Like, this is what I wanted that Aha album to be. Yes.
Yeah. This is kind of like the next iteration too of like what ABBA would do, or ABBA, and then kind of like added more beats or synth to it or something. I think what I really liked it, bottom line, and I agree with you guys. I think it does sound modern. That's what I wrote down. I feel like this, you could play any of these songs now, and anything post synth introduction, it would feel just as in place at a club today with other songs. I think I agree. I think the production is immaculate. I know they remastered the album in 2001 or something. I don't know if that's what we're hearing, but I mean, it does sound really great. I think the other thing that I really like about this is there's kind of a lightness to it. It's not moody like some of the other, like New Order and Depeche Mode. So I appreciate that. I feel like they have a sense of humor on this album. Something hilarious like in Rent, where they said, the chorus is "I love you because you pay the rent," and shopping is like a critique on, just the modern economy and capitalism, and with a track called Hit Music, you're I don't think you're taking yourself too seriously, but there's definitely talent here, and I enjoyed this more than Depeche Mode and New Order and those other electronic bands that 80s electronic bands that we've listened to. And yeah, I agree too that every track is worthy of listening to, and they all sound different, and they all have catchy choruses almost, and they all add something a little different from one song to the next, and I couldn't help but just like move along while listening to the album, and it was it's very accessible also. I found.
I'll give you two tidbits which I found kind of interesting, that they were on the record as saying they wrote the song Heart with the idea of submitting it to Madonna to play, which when you listen to it, you're like, oh, I could definitely see that. For sure. But they didn't do it. I think he said like he didn't want to risk disappointment if she said I don't want it, but that was the thing. And then Lady Gaga said that before her debut, she listened to the hell out of the Pet Shop Boys beforehand. I'm like, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? So when I saw that, yeah.
And I'm sorry, guys. I have a quick cleaning of the stacks. This is in Rolling Stone's list. My bad.
I was about to say it showed up everywhere here.
It's 435 on Rolling Stone's list. So
Okay.
yeah, it is on there.
Nice.
Yeah, but that's Lady Gaga. Yeah, absolutely. Like, very much, in her lane.
Yeah, I think that's a testament to their kind of influence, I think, and their sensibility with making electronic music. She definitely incorporates electronic sound and synths into her, famous songs.
I love the transitions in a lot of their songs too, and but most notably in "What Have I Done to Deserve This?" Like the layering and how they transition into those almost like two different choruses, right? The one that Dusty Springfield is singing, and then also sort of a spoken word version of it that's layered or that what have I
Right.
done to
Yeah.
deserve? And then it's like, since you went away, like it's just, there's like so, and then it gets really sparse, right? Where everything drops out and it's like atmospheric almost, that it comes back in. It's just, and it makes sense they would want Dusty Springfield to sing with them too, because she had that camp element too, that played perfectly. And, they were doing the gender neutral pronouns too, clearly, like in their
Yes.
songs. It's like a lot of you realize pretty quickly, that like there's a lot of these and stuff. And I'm pretty sure one of the Pet Shop Boys, in fact, I'm certain that Neil Tennant, right, is the one.
Yeah,
I think
he came out
he
at some
came
point.
out at some point, but he kind of said he specifically wrote the songs to not be identified either with a specific gender, but also not like easy to identify as gay either, right? Like he wanted to be as accessible as possible. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So thumbs up all around. It
Yeah.
sounds like from us.
Yeah, man, this is gonna rate well in the decade for me too. That's how strong I felt about this album for sure.
Yeah, it's just like pure fun type of well-made music.
Yeah, I don't know how you can't like this.
Yeah.
I don't know how I
you know?
wasn't listening to this, despite the fact that it was omnipresent in my dad's CD collection, and I went through almost everything else, but somehow didn't do this.
See,
so.
your dad's got a great wide variety of. I mean, all the prog rock and stuff, and then he goes something straight
Yeah.
up synth pop too.
This seems kind of like an outlier, but maybe you haven't revealed his whole music collection.
I can even remember that this was next to Rush Chronicles, like in his CD collection thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Which obviously didn't sound anything like this, but yeah, that's where it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't even come close with alphabetical either.
Well,
Unless
P
he
and
just
R.
jumps right for the P and the P to the R, didn't have anything in between. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he has them ordered autobiographical.
I don't.
like in high
No, I don't think he had any orders. I think it's just was where they were, right? in the thing.
Autobiographical.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Okay. What else do I? Any final thoughts, guys, on the album before I wrap up?
Nope, just
No.
thumbs up.
Check
Yep.
it out.
Pleasant
Yep.
surprise. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Let's see.
Also, one of the easiest albums to decipher that all three of us were gonna like it. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Their first tour, they actually didn't go on tour until 1989, and where they went to Hong Kong, Japan, and around Britain. And then they did their first world tour in 1991, and the tour was called keeping the one-word title Performance was the name of their tour. In 1989, backing up a little bit, Tenet formed a supergroup with Bernard Sumner and Johnny Marr called Electronic, and they released a self-titled album in 1991.
Oh, we talked about them. I remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing the Pet Shop Boy guy in that, but I remember Johnny Marr and Bernard Sumner doing that. Yeah.
So
Okay. Wow.
that must be interesting, I imagine. They also created a stage musical titled Closer to Heaven, which premiered in May of 2001 in London and ran to October 2001. They also did a film shortly after actually was released called It Couldn't Happen Here, which was a full-length musical film released in July of 88. And it's described as they embark upon a journey across England, but which England? Is it the half-remembered England of their childhoods or the brutal reality of Mrs. Thatcher's late 80s England? It features some of their most popular songs. So haven't
Think
seen
emoji.
that. Yeah. And what else? They often collaborate and produce and remix other artists' songs as well. In 1994, they remixed Blur's single Girls and Boys. They remixed a Bowie song in 96 called Hello Space Boy, which they then performed with him at the 1996 Brit Awards. They produced a track on Tina Turner's album Wildest Dreams. And they've also worked with artists like Kylie Minogue, Madonna, Elton John, Robbie Williams, Rufus Wainwright. And they have a series of remix albums titled Disco, and they're up to Disco 4 at this point on those. So they're really in kind of the club electronic music sphere more than anything, I think. And they continue to make albums. Their 14th album, Hotspot, came out in 2020, and their delayed Dream World tour kicked off in May of 2022. So they are still making music.
Right
That's
on.
all I got. Yep.